Hello everybody, I hope wherever you're watching us from, you're having a great time. This is AfriPost and welcome to today's video. Over many times, we have always been told that Africa is underdeveloped. And one question that has always ringed in my mind is that what could be the major cause of the underdevelopment attributed to Africa? There are those who have tried to push a racist claim where they're saying that the underdevelopment in Africa is a proof that black people are worthless and that they are not able to really do anything for themselves. However, there are those who are of the school of thought that Africa has been unlucky. This is because there are those people who have taken advantage of it and used its leaders to really cripple the development in the continent. Now, to kind of address this issue deeply, I want us to listen to this speech by this pan-africanist, Kagoro. He is speaking about the failures of African leaders and why they are responsible for crippling development in the continent. Let's watch this, then come back and talk about it more.
We've been telling young people, go to school, get educated, then you'll get a good job, you'll be empowered. But in most of our countries, the people who are living the best lives have no education. The people who are driving the best cars, no education. We've built a culture where we are telling everybody else to comply with governance processes and the instrumental and intrinsic value of governance institutions. And yet those who break the law, either because they are so high up in government, they're untouchable. So high up in the military, they're untouchable. So high up in the police, they're untouchable. They, their children, their cronies, their girlfriends, and their cats seem to live with impunity. And the only people who live subjected to the reformed governance systems and laws are poor people who will never break through the glass ceiling of deified, sanctified, and elevated fiefdom. How do you deal with the fact that in some of our countries, we've governed the people so badly that citizens are by nature bandits and hostile to the state, even the things that the state does that is good for them? We have political cadres now occupying significant positions in government because they are loyal. Some of them are fantastically incompetent, but they are wonderful people. Unfortunately, wonderfulness does not cure the underdevelopment challenge or the ability of external forces to hijack our governance. The middle class is the worst enemy of governance reforms. Most instances when our institutions are beginning to fail, the middle class takes an escapist attitude. The middle class, electricity is not being provided. We buy generators and solar power. We don't even hold to account those who collect taxes to make sure we have electricity. When security is not working, we hire private security firms. We are no longer interested in the police. Everything that the middle class does is to delegitimize the state when we are legitimating our comforts. The fact that we have lost faith in the state is what enables the big gulf between the top, the middle, and the bottom. We're recycling thieving elites who are living half the time out in Europe, investing everything they were stealing out in Europe. Now the problem we had was, we tell these young people, you have to be law-abiding. There will not be peace and security. Based on this lie, that others have a right to eat, and the rest have a right to silence. Right? Silence. Eating is in progress. Oh, silence. And then, you then come to some of the elites, you say, but the things happening in your country, what do you think about them? And they say, hey, Aki, it's bad manners to talk whilst you are eating. So they are silent, observing table manners. We have equated having things with being, so that those who have things are considered more human beings. They are not arrested, they are not harassed because they have things. They have Lamborghinis, they have Porsche Cayennes, they have big houses. So every single person now wants to have things. And the best way to get things is either you get miracle money in church, you go to the occult, or you steal. Natif. So what we have done is created an industry of co-conspirators, right from the top of government the top of mosque and church to the bottom of society. Those who are deemed as the role models, those that are deemed as the philanthropists, are in essence criminals who masquerade in our society. However, and this is the thing that I came here to say to you, modern day governance reforms must accept others have designs on our countries. You can say, no, my country is small, or my country is peaceful. My country does not fight with anyone. They don't care as long as you have what they need. They are going to come and try and corrupt your politicians, corrupt your citizens. If they can't corrupt them, cause them to rebel against you. If they can't cause them to rebel against you, just cause some discontent. Sorry, I cannot be diplomatic. It is not my duty to be diplomatic. Pan-Africanism is not diplomatic. As black people, we were so, we spent half our time obeying rules. Now, here's the thing. I have a lot of time criticizing what Europeans and Americans and the Asians and others do to destroy our sovereignty. That we must never neglect doing. However, I would be dishonest if I did not focus that the discontent of the youth, their sense of exclusion, is the very fact that our local elite, political, bureaucratic, economic, and etc., have spent half their time disemboweling the state, taking out the honey, whilst the people are on the margins. All they're asking for is a little salt, a little bread, a little something to sustain their soul. I think the most politically unconscious by practice are those in most of our country's leadership. Because if they were conscious by having read book, they are not conscious by practice. Because it is not, you cannot be Pan-Africanist by making a great speech at the African Union and then come back and steal all your country's wealth. Some minister in a country not too far from here was paid $300,000 for mining rights for people to get between 3 billion and 40 billion per month. So, my friends, most of the private sector in many African countries is really government senior ministers who, at the point of privatization, privatize the private, and they are the owners. And then they are simply fronts for Western interests. Say no if you want, and I'll produce evidence, right? So when we say private sector-led growth, the people are saying, You are asking us to give the thieves more money. So friends, if we are going to have a private sector, it needs to be not only patriotic but competent. The median age of leadership in Africa is 64. The median age overall, young people is 19, but the median age of leadership is 64. Now, in most countries, the number of people above the age of 64 is less than 4% of the population. And that 4% of the population controls 80% of power in our countries. The fastest growing industry in all our countries has been religion. Now, you do consciousness in school, they undo it in church. So I have a suggestion. It is for government and for the faith sector and others to work around what is it that we're trying to build, what kind of citizens. Because on average, religious entities gather 65% of the population 4 times a week, every week. Even the most effective politician is not able to do that. In some countries, a single religious leader gathers between 30 to 60,000 people in a stadium 3 times a week. And the government has to pay young people to come to a meeting like this because they need facilitation to travel. But those religious leaders get paid by the poor. And I will avoid, for purposes of peace and security, calling any of them fraudulent or false or manipulative. I'll just simply call them religious leaders. But the poor go and they pay. Even your grandmother, your great-grandmother pays. So the consciousness we need to build is together with those that control mass opinion on a regular basis. Religion is producing for us politicians. Religion is producing for us business people. Religion is producing for us lecturers. And these people are not going to lecture outside the comforts of their religious base. So I want to suggest religion is a key side of struggle. I need to say this, and I hope someone will hear me in this room. The countries that are leading in manufacturing of goods that we use every day, of technology that we use every day, are not Germany, Britain, France, and America. It's China, India, Turkey, South Korea, and etc. And if you ask us where we are sending our students, spending lots of money for fellowship and scholarships, we are still sending them to the past. That's why they come back with good French, good English, and sometimes even good Spanish. And they cannot produce anything. Electrical engineer, can't fix light bulb. As a former UN employee, I keep telling people, I was part of the lying industry that kept telling people, by 2050, 75% of Africans will be living in urban areas. And I keep saying the only reason why that will become true is because we are not investing in the rural sector. And let me repeat, the majority of conflicts generated by extractive industries or generated by land grabbing or generated by the battle over water are not urban conflicts. Those battles are happening in the rural areas. Now I understand why I was part of those miseducated elites who kept on saying by 2050, 75% of Africans will be living in urban areas. I was preparing our people to leave the land, to leave the rivers, to leave the water, to leave the organic food, to come into town so that those who were coming with money to take it to invest for their own countries could come. And because they are not that sophisticated in most of our countries, it's easier for big industries and big people who are coming to grab land, grab wildlife and stuff to corrupt them. That is where we fight from a base. And our base is we cannot be handing over our natural resources, our land, our water, and etc., and only training our young people to become good French and English speakers.
Now, these are some of the best speeches that I try to listen to most of the times because as an African and as a black person, I'm always intrigued by these people who really try to teach Africans the best strategies they can adopt to really ensure that they are well empowered and that they are able to compete in the League of Nations. Now, I keenly listened to one Brian Kagoro, and this speech reminded me of a speech that was made by one Nobel laureate winner who was Kenyan. This was Professor Wangari Maathai. This speech that I'm going to read for you was given in the 4th United Nations World Women's Conference in Beijing, China, that was held on 30th August 1995. And this is what Professor Wangari Maathai said then and still remains to date, that development in Africa has been derailed by a destructive style of political and economic leadership. So this is what the good professor said. Africa has suffered from lack of enlightened leadership and a bad style of political and economic guidance. While African leaders could have excused themselves for being unable to protect their people from exploits of colonial empires in the 19th and 20th centuries, they can hardly escape blame for allowing neocolonial exploitation, which continues to reduce many of their people into paupers in their own countries. During the past 3 decades, Africa suffered lack of visionary and altruistic leaders committed to the welfare of their own people. They were persuaded to accept the development model of the West, borrow capital from the West, and be guided by experts from the same West. This was partly possible because the colonial administration deliberately destroyed and discredited the traditional forms of self-governance in Africa. Until late 1950s, when the inevitable wave of decolonization swept across Africa, natives were not allowed to practice their own form of governance, culture, religion, tradition, and customs. While the colonial forms of governance was being put in place, the Western religion and values were being imposed on those who converted into Christianity. Whatever provided guidance and order in the society was banned or condemned by the Western missionaries as being incompatible with the teachings of Christ and Christianity. I think from this point you're able to understand why even Brian Kagoro is able to say that religion has been a tool that really contributed largely to the underdevelopment of African continent, because while school has taught people to be enlightened, religion has worked to ensure that those who are enlightened get back into their zombie state. So this is also the same thing that was said over 20 years ago by Professor Wangari Maathai. And imagine this still remains the same to date. The development of the continent is being derailed by leaders who are not visionary, leaders who are able to act as puppets and not putting African desires ahead. Just before independence was granted, young Africans were promoted to positions hitherto unoccupied by the local people, and they were trained by colonial masters to take over power from colonial administration. Many of these African recruits were politically naive and uninformed. Some of them were naive collaborators with the colonial administration during the struggle of independence. Their employment into the prestigious administrative positions previously preserved for the colonial masters was a manipulative ploy. It blinded them. They became collaborating students of the same colonial administration who wanted devotees of their philosophy and values to govern the new independent African states. These were to be the collaborators of neo-colonialism. So Wangari Maathai puts it quite clearly that this is something that needs to be highlighted, because there are those who are trained by the white men to be their chiefs and their collaborators in the continent. While we got our leadership or our independence, they did not give it to us freehand. They retrained their people and put them in spaces where they could easily control them and get anything that they desired. So flattered by the newfound power and prestige in their new state, many Africans became sucked into mechanisms which facilitated the continued exploitation of Africa and African people. It was easy for the new rulers to be blinded with material wealth and privilege associated with wealth and political power because they were naive and inexperienced. This development allowed the beginning of a small group of African elites who were in the liaison with the rich North to continue the exploitation of the African resources while ignoring the fate of the impoverished majority. With the bad beginning, leadership in Africa became characterized by opportunism, personal advancement, and enrichment at the expense of the masses. The new black administrators and the bourgeoisie elites enjoyed the same economic and social lifestyle and privilege which the imperial administrators enjoyed. The only difference between the two in terms of the objective for the country was the color of their skin. This elite class became accustomed to the privileged lifestyle which was impossible to sustain without continuing the exploitation of the oppression of the governed, and thus was laid the foundation for the present political, economic, and social crisis in Africa. I think Professor Wangari Maathai did justice to the topic. She laid bare the major root cause of the challenges that Africa continued to face. And then one thing she did there is kind of give us a glimpse of who or which people are responsible for the underdevelopment of Africa. She has said quite clearly that there were those political elites that were trained by white people to take up leadership after the so-called independence of African countries. These people were trained into adapting the strategies that were used by the white men to control the black people. And that is why, with the tokens that they got, the self-aggrandizement that they got, the wealth that they were given, and tokenism that preceded their leadership, they have sustained this kind of leadership where Africans or the governed in Africa do not get their rightful share of governance. African style of leadership was eliminated and a new style brought to us so that we are able to have a new style of government. This is a very profound issue that I think most of us must come out and understand keenly and also talk about it so that our generations or even future generations are able to really address this issue to its finality. That's the end of our video today. If you like such kind of videos, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and also share. Also remember to give us your perspective down in the comment section so that we may also understand what you think and what you know about the issue. Thank you, and may the good Lord bless you. Goodbye.